If there was ever an episode of The Boys that was about something, it was this one, and it's about dads. Episode 3 of Season 5 of The Boys featured almost every character either having an issue with their father or having an issue with their children. And I think that's interesting because episodes of The Boys aren't usually this focused. So I wanted to take a video to talk about the episode, much like my Invincible video this week, where I ranked who was the most effective in the big fight. I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to rank the dads. This is a ranking of every dad that was either shown or mentioned in this episode based on how good of a dad they are. Because I think who's a good dad, who's a bad dad, what makes you one or the other, how the consequences of one bad dad end up leading to the next, I think is very interesting. So full spoilers for episode 3 of season 5, which is called Every One of You Sons of Bitches. And we're going to start at the top with the best dad of the episode, and that is Samir. Not just because the best things happen to him, but because he feels like he's one of the only characters with principles left. And once he finds out that Butcher killed Victoria, he rebels against the group for lying to him, confronts them, and safely leaves with his child. And yes, a lot of why he got out of that room alive came from Kimiko's intervention. But Kimiko seeing Samir and Zoe reminded her of what good a family can do and why it is so important to them in that moment that they don't do any more harm to this family. So very simply, because of his principles, I'm going to put Samir at number 1. Number 2 dad of the episode, this one's a weird one, Frenchie. Frenchie had a talk with Kimiko this week about what they want to do after all of this is done. He said he wants to travel, and she said she wants to start a family and settle down. And it's the first sign that their relationship may not actually work in the long term, because it doesn't seem like Frenchie wants kids. We don't know exactly why, probably because he doesn't want to bring them into this world that he's a part of, where he has to kill people and then become the object of vengeance by the people whose children he killed, and this vicious circle that not bringing kids into makes sense. So in some ways, Frenchie's being a good dad by not wanting to be a dad because he does not believe he would do a good job as one. And that may end up hurting his relationship with Kimiko, but in the long term, it does seem like that's for the best, if they're not going to agree on this. So Frenchie, number 2 dad with an asterisk, in that he is not a dad. But maybe that's the best dadness Frenchie can do. Dad number 3, and this is a dad that I think we forget frequently as a dad, is MM. He is a dad. He has a daughter and an ex-wife. I kind of assume at some point they will come up later, but it does kind of feel interesting that in this episode where we spent time with all of the dads, MM talked about his own future. Talked about what he plans to do when this is all over. But it seems like he's kind of written off his family and decided he's going to get revenge on Stan Edgar and keep fighting with Vought. And he's given up that part of his life. And maybe, to be fair to MM, his daughter and his wife are safer this way. But it's interesting because that has not really been part of his narrative this season. And it almost kind of feels like over the course of the last season, MM gave up that part of himself, gave up the idea of him having a happy life after all of this. So again, not a very good dad. But when you compare him to the ones lower on the list, he's okay. Number 4 on the dad list. And no, I'm not putting Huey's dad on here because they just barely mention him. Also, Huey is one of the only non-dad men in this show, which is ironic because he would probably be the best dad on the show. Now we're getting into the dads we can kind of call bad dads. We had a very interesting performance this week from Billy Butcher. Now he is Ryan's adoptive father, since Ryan is technically the child of Homelander and Becca. And over the course of the last few seasons, Butcher's had a real problem with understanding what being Ryan's somewhat father means. Sometimes it's sacrificing himself to save Ryan, or giving up what he really wants, fighting Homelander, protect his son from Soldier Boy. And the same way with MM, it feels like that father plotline has kind of fallen off. With Butcher, it feels like it is always moving forward and always weighing this character down in an interesting way. But because this week we reunited with Edgar, and I guess Butcher knows that Zoe and Ryan have a thing, so he used that reunion trying to convince Ryan to help him kill Homelander. But because of the circumstances of this season, the only way they can do that is with the virus. And I do like that this week Butcher is like, we need to kill Homelander as quickly as we can because he is trying to be immortal. We had a feeling based on the trailer that was what he was going to be working on this season. But like tactically, I think what Butcher's saying makes sense. And I understand his plan here because yeah, Ryan is one of Homelander's only remaining weaknesses, or at least Butcher thinks Ryan is. So Butcher comes up with this plan that is going to end with his son being killed. So that's why he can't be in the top half of the dad rankings. But I think what makes Butcher really interesting in this episode is he just treats Ryan like an adult, or at least a young adult. He doesn't lie to him. Ryan knows the stakes, Butcher knows the danger. I think when Butcher honestly tries to be a good dad, it works. He's a good dad. He cares about Ryan. He can be fun. He can be funny like they are with the Terror this episode. And it seems like up until this point, he has been fighting with the idea of, do I use Ryan as a weapon? Because Ryan is one of the only people that may be able to kill Homelander. Or do I keep Ryan out of this completely? Do I bring him into the boys and try to raise him myself? Butcher has had a conflict with that this whole time, but it seems like this episode was one of the first times, because of Homelander forcing his hand, he realized he doesn't really have a choice, and the best he can do for Ryan is be honest with him. Because I think Butcher realistically knows if Homelander can get the V1, he won't need Ryan. And in fact, Ryan will be a big threat. So is Butcher cold and calculating? Of course. But he's trying his best to be a good dad. He does that thing that happens at the end of Harry and the Hendersons, where he yells at his kid, and he's like, get out of here, you're not even good for fighting Homelander, I was just using you. Which I feel like that's how a lot of the interactions between Butcher and Ryan end, and that led Ryan to do something stupid, but you can't really blame Ryan for that. And you can't blame Butcher for wanting to get Ryan far away after it turns out they don't have the one weapon they can use to stop Homelander. Butcher's one of those characters too that was clearly raised by a bad dad, and this comes up a little bit this episode, but he doesn't seem to know what a good dad is. And for that reason, it seems like he has a lot of trouble deciding how to deal with Ryan. He's always second guessing himself because he is making this up as he goes along, even more than your average dad. Fifth best dad, Translucent. We mentioned him in this episode because we get more of Maverick. Maverick is Translucent's son, who is one of the first crossover characters from Gen V we've seen in The Boys, and he is an invisible guy. Not sure where the name Maverick comes from, since translucent had such a clear meaning, but I guess there are only so many adjectives for that. And why is Translucent a bad dad? Well, very simply, because he did bad guy things, and then he got killed in the process of that. Remember, in the beginning of season 1, Translucent attacks Huey. We also see bits earlier in the episode with him being like a sex pest. But if Translucent had stayed out of this, he would not have died, and he would not have put Maverick in the situation Maverick was in, where Maverick felt like he needed to avenge his father. Even though he knew Huey wasn't dangerous, because of these expectations about how a son is supposed to avenge their father, Maverick was put into danger and ended up getting exploded because of it. Is Translucent 100% to blame? I mean, not necessarily, but does this not happen if Translucent just doesn't do bad guy stuff? Yes. And that's why I don't think in this show making the right choice always leads to the right result, but making the wrong choice almost always ends up leading to the wrong result. And this is a good example of that. And I think the message of this episode is the conversation between Huey and Maverick. Because so many of the characters in this show have some sort of grief that they're bearing, some sort of vengeance they want to carry out to create some sort of justice, like Butcher describes to Ryan. But Huey is the only character that seems to be able to understand that, no, you don't need to do that. You should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, but you don't need to take on all that hate and all that anger. And if Maverick had listened to him, he probably wouldn't have exploded. That's how good of a dad Huey is. He's such a good dad, he probably would have saved Maverick if he hadn't killed Maverick's dad. Next worst dad is Butcher's dad. I wanted to throw him in the list because he does get the mention that Billy killed him, threw him into the Thames. And it just seems like he was an actively bad dad. I think Butcher's dad is the first dad on this list who not only put their child in harm's way as a result of their actions, but specifically caused direct harm to their child. And when you think about Butcher's relationship with his dad, it really explains Butcher's relationship with Ryan, because in a lot of these scenarios, he's just trying to not be his dad. He was cruel, he was mean, and obviously Butcher's trying to be nice, but more than that, Butcher's trying to be honest, trying to treat Ryan like an equal. And maybe that's the best way that Butcher can relate to Ryan, is as an equal, because he has so much trouble with this dad relationship. If he just treats Ryan like another one of the boys, maybe they can have a meaningful relationship, and maybe they can save the world. That's what Butcher believes. Number 7. All right, now we're down to the bottom 3 in the bad dad rankings. We're getting Stan Edgar here. I am putting Stan Edgar below Billy Butcher's dad because Stan Edgar is a character that should know better. Butcher's dad is a weird guy. We don't know everything about the circumstances of their upbringing, but he doesn't seem like he's got it all together. Whereas Edgar does, and Edgar seems resigned to the idea that even when Homelander is dead, he still wants to be in charge. And he believes he should be in charge, which is great for him. But where does that leave Zoe? Where did that leave Victoria, his actual daughter? Can Stan Edgar be a good dad if he does not seem to have much humanity left? At least when Butcher considers putting Ryan in this dangerous situation, he feels bad about it. Stan Edgar feels completely detached, so he's number 7. Number 8 in the dad rankings, no surprise, Soldier Boy. So the Soldier Boy Homelander relationship is the central relationship of this episode. Starts the episode, Soldier Boy is reintroduced into the 7, which is now the 6th, but still that's closer to 7 than 5, I guess. He's given what I believe is called the Vought Medal of Patriotic Freedom, a nod to all those times everybody gave fake medals to Trump. And because of how toxic Homelander's relationship with Soldier Boy is, when Soldier Boy was getting some attention, Homelander needed to recapture that attention, and he exposed the fact that Soldier Boy is his father. Now, Soldier Boy, speaking of characters that don't seem to have it all together, doesn't seem to have it all together. We see in his first season he's dealing with PTSD, and also he's just a sexist jerk. And because Soldier Boy does not see Homelander as his son, he doesn't care. He sees him as a peer. I mean, he believes he is peerless, so Soldier Boy sees Homelander as more of a cheap knockoff. But what makes Soldier Boy so bad at this is that Soldier Boy doesn't seem to realize the effect he has on Homelander. And you see that in the conversation Soldier Boy has with Firecracker in bed. Says all kinds of mean things about Homelander, which fine, Homelander's bad. Soldier Boy sees Homelander as competition, because much like the Butcher and Ryan relationship, Homelander isn't really Soldier Boy's son. Because Soldier Boy can't really grasp that relationship, he is pushing Homelander further and further to this extreme, where Homelander believes he needs to one-up his father, because he thinks that that will get him love from his father, who doesn't seem to have any kind feelings towards him. But all Soldier Boy sees is another soup trying to come for his throne. Also, I absolutely love Soldier Boy this season. I think I liked him the first season he was in. I don't think I appreciated how funny he is. I love how much they stick to his weird, dated cultural references being a joke, no matter where they come in a conversation.
If you can act hysterical, I'm gonna slap you like I'm Connery.
I do my best work from underneath. Ask Heather Von Every. That's on the record.
Okay, well, Bill Cosby is America's dad, and I'll tell you one thing, he wouldn't be caught dead in that pussy gear.
So much so that even if he and Homelander are having an argument, after he makes one of his bizarre references, Homelander still gets a moment to squint his eyes and go like, wait, what? I also think Jensen Ackles is just very funny generally. The same way that Chase Crawford is really good at playing a douchebag, and he's so good this episode. Besides the fact that he has a Cybertruck and the fact that he's playing Limp Bizkit.
No cap on God, bro.
Might be the funniest line of this week. I don't know if it's the funniest line of this season so far. I do think looking back, one of my favorite lines of this season comes from Firecracker in episode 1. Not because it's an amazing line, but because of how silly it is and how well Valerie Curry delivers it. And it's this.
Them pills just janked up my ticker something awful.
And I really like that Firecracker kind of gets Homelander. She kind of gets all of these people. And it's more impressive, honestly, when you look at her skill set, because she just doesn't have good superpowers. She can kind of make fireworks. She's the worst version of Jubilee that ever existed. But she's been able to parlay that into a career in media by understanding what the people in charge want. And she's more manipulative than I think we give her credit for. And I just think that character is very funny. Then in the thing out of all of the soups this season, she feels like the one that's the most real. Like the one that would most exist in our world. But anyway, back to the dad thing, because we're almost done with this ranking. Soldier Boy, very, very bad dad. Right? He's fought his son on multiple occasions. And the fact that he doesn't understand the relationship between himself and Homelander, and he will not give Homelander the approval he wants, drives Homelander to be the number 9 on this list worst dad of the episode, not just because he nearly beat his son to death, but because the way that he reacts to learning about the V1 reveals what he thought of fatherhood all along. Homelander has always wanted to be the best, to be powerful, to be beloved, and part of being the best means living forever. And part of living forever, usually the only way you can live forever, is by having a child. You live on through them, kind of. And it does seem like Homelander understood, we got a lot of this last season, that even with his superpowers, he still was mortal. So he saw Ryan as a way to continue living. But now that Homelander understands that he can gain immortality, he doesn't need Ryan anymore. He'd like to have a good relationship with Ryan, but as you see at the end of this episode, once it is clear that that is not going to happen, Homelander is fine with killing his son. I'm really glad this week Ryan got to confront Homelander about what Homelander did to his mother. That felt like one of those things that needed to happen in the final season. Getting it out of the way now is interesting because it gives Ryan time to react to that information, maybe turn Ryan even further against Homelander. And I like that even though Butcher knew that Homelander didn't really care about Ryan, he still knew that he could use Ryan to get Homelander out of Vought Tower. Because for Homelander, And somewhat for Butcher, having a child, having a person who you care about is a weakness, especially one who's not as strong as you. And that brings the Butcher-Homelander-Ryan relationship back to where it always kind of was. And Butcher rejecting Ryan, pushing him away, and then Homelander almost killing Ryan, puts Ryan into a really interesting spot. He doesn't seem like he's fully lost it like Homelander. At the same time, though, it feels unclear how he's going to factor into the finale. Is he going to work against Butcher? Is he going to just disappear after this point? He's definitely going to blame Butcher for putting him in this situation and for not protecting him from Homelander. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if the series ends with Butcher making one last big sacrifice to save and protect Ryan. I don't fully know how that would work. It's interesting because, like, what is a post-finale world going to look like? Are all the Supes going to be dead? Is Homelander going to be dead? Is the Seven going to still exist? Could Ryan just leave? Will he have to be the new Homelander? Which dad will he take on the responsibilities of? If he takes on the responsibilities of either of them, because he could just try to disappear. I think it's interesting because we really don't know what this character wants, so it's hard to tell where he's going to end up. But yeah, I think because he almost beat his son to death and clearly only values his son as an extension of his own mortality, Homelander's definitely the worst dad of the episode. It's so interesting because Homelander we see in this episode has been rejected by so many father figures. Edgar, Soldier Boy, all the male scientists that worked with him in the past. So it's not incredibly surprising that in this episode, after all the men in Homelander's life rejected him, his own mother figure showed up in a hallucination from heaven, who now just drinks and bathes in breast milk, basically reaffirmed all of his worst instincts. People will love him when they fear him. He deserves immortality like Jesus. Also, I have to point out, it is very interesting. The Homelander story took a left turn into religion, and then at the same time, the Trump story took a weird left turn into religion. Usually he doesn't interact too much with religious figures, but it turns out the Pope is anti-war, so now he's fighting with the Pope. So an interesting episode, all these parallels and these relationships between fathers and sons and daughters. Now, has this always been what The Boys has been about? Kind of. Is it what all superhero media is about? Yeah, kind of. Find me a superhero movie from the last couple of years where all the fathers and children have a completely normal relationship. Doesn't exist. And you know, it's interesting, the relationship between Homelander and everybody else in the world reminds me of a classic Twilight Zone episode where the kid has control over everybody in the town. It's called It's a Good Life. And it does feel like stories like that are a big part of the DNA of The Boys, using science fiction concepts to get at deeper human issues. And I was thinking about the Twilight Zone the other day because I was watching a video by a YouTuber, Captain Midnight. It's part of a series called Showrunners, and the first episode is about Rod Serling, the man who created the Twilight Zone. You learn about how Serling came up, what his philosophy was when it came to media, how that influenced one of the most influential shows in the history of television. And you can find that video, along with tons of other exclusive videos, and all my videos early and ad-free on Nebula. Nebula is, say it with me, a subscription streaming service that I and a bunch of other really cool people helped create. Nebula has evolved so much over the last 7 years. Sure, you can still watch all my videos early and ad-free. You can watch videos by a bunch of other creators you probably already love. But one of the most exciting things about Nebula is our original programming. Tom Scott has a new series called England, where he goes to every English county to find something interesting. Did you check out this first episode where Tom Scott goes to Leicestershire and he visits a bell making factory? You see the entire process, learn how bells are made, and it is not how you would expect, especially since this bell making factory is hundreds of years old and they're still working with some of the same techniques from a century ago. Tom Scott even gets to use a sledgehammer to break one of the bells a little, because shockingly, it's hard to do. It's hard to use a sledgehammer to break an enormous bell. And each episode of England is going to be on Nebula for a week before it goes anywhere else. On top of that, we got a series that I love watching called Abolish Everything, where someone, maybe a comedian, maybe another YouTuber, makes an argument for something that should be abolished. They state their case, they make a very funny PowerPoint, the political establishment gets to weigh in, and then the audience decides what deserves to actually be abolished. This week they did the championship for the second season. They had a ton of really funny people on it. I've never been on that show, maybe sometime in the future. I think I'd be a fun abolitionist. And then later this year, although hopefully not too much later, Nebula's first original dramatic scripted series, Subliminal, comes out with the episode that I wrote, which I cannot wait for you guys to watch. Nebula is the best way to support all of the creators you already love and all the creators you don't know you're going to love, but then you're going to love them when you see them on Nebula. You can also download the videos to your phone, which saves you data when you're not at home. And there are not AI videos on Nebula, so this isn't going to be like YouTube where you go on and you watch a video in a minute or two and you're like, something's off here, and then you realize like, oh, this video is AI. which happens on YouTube and other platforms way more than I would like to admit. Nebula, we all got real stuff made by real creators, and that's why it's great. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year, $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year of Nebula for just $30. That is $2.50 a month. It is an amazing deal. Again, go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut to check it out. Thank you for watching this video. That's all I got. Stay safe.